Let me tell you something strange. Throughout history, the people who produced the greatest ideas were often not the ones who read the most books. Discomfort is where thinking begins. I'm not telling you that reading books is worthless. Let's be clear about that. But I am telling you this. If you had to choose between reading and thinking, and these really are two different things, thinking wins every time. And right now, most of us are confusing the two. We think we're thinking while we read, but most of the time, we're simply accepting someone else's thoughts. Here's the thing. The human brain works in a strange way. When you read something, the brain calls it understanding. But there's an enormous difference between understanding and thinking. Understanding is passive. It's grasping what something says. Thinking is active. It's questioning why something is the way it is, what it means to you, and where it might be wrong. And this is where most of us fall into a serious trap. For years, we were taught, read. The more you read, the smarter you become. The more books you finish, the more knowledgeable you are. Reading is virtue. Reading is enlightenment. Reading is success. And we internalized all of it. We count how many books we've read on Goodreads. We arrange books on our shelves so the spines face out. We say, I read 50 books this year, as if we'd actually thought 50 times. But think about this. Out of those 50 books, how many ideas are genuinely yours? How many of them could you have arrived at simply by living, observing, turning a question over in your mind for hours? Newton didn't discover the laws of the universe while reading a book. An apple fell, or didn't. That part is debated. But either way, he sat down and thought, deeply, for a long time, looking at nothing. Einstein didn't learn the special theory of relativity from a book. He had a thought experiment in his mind. If I travel at the speed of light, what happens to light? He carried that question in his head for years. The answer wasn't in any book, because until that point, no one had asked that question. This is the critical part. If the answer to a question already exists in a book, what moves you forward isn't reading that book. It's asking that question yourself. The book is just a shortcut, sometimes necessary, sometimes not. But the real power lies in asking. So let me ask you something. When did you last truly think? Has it happened in recent months? Turning off your phone, cutting the music, sitting somewhere, and just thinking about one thing. A problem, a dream, a question, without looking anything up, without reading anything, just with your own mind? For most of us, the answer is no. And that's a frightening thing because thinking is like a muscle. If you don't use it, it atrophies, and we have let that muscle atrophy completely. Every idle moment, we reach for our phones, reading something, watching something, listening to something. We're constantly feeding our brains input, but never giving them the chance to process it. Think of a computer. If you kept loading data but never ran any processes, what would happen? It would crash. We're crashing too. But we can't see it as crashing because we're full of information. We seem smart enough. But this is exactly the difference between knowledge and intelligence. Knowledge is what you have. Intelligence is what you do with what you have. And look, reading is a wonderful thing. I'll say it again. But reading only introduces you to someone else's thoughts. What you do with those thoughts, how you question them, where you extend them, where you find the contradictions, all of that belongs to thinking. And most of us are skipping that step. We read a book, move on to the next, listen to a podcast, move on to the next, watch a video, move on to the next. Constant consumption, zero production. And if the mind doesn't produce, it doesn't truly grow. It accumulates knowledge, but it doesn't grow. Do you know Montaigne, a French thinker from the 16th century, one of the most important writers of his time? And do you know what was most striking about him? He had access to the best libraries in Europe, yet he trusted none of them. I learn not from books, but from myself, he said. In what he called his essays, he spent years writing his own thoughts, his own observations, his own contradictions. He asked questions no one had asked. He thought in ways no one had thought. And today, that man is remembered as one of the most original voices in Western literature, because he trusted his own mind. Now I'm going to tell you something hard. Most of us don't trust our own minds. That's why we retreat to books. Let me learn this from an expert. Let me read about it. Let me see what others think. This is understandable. It can even be a sign of humility. But at some point, that humility turns into intellectual laziness. And beyond that point, you lose the ability to think, because you've been conditioned to outsource every question to a book. And yet your brain is one of the most complex and powerful structures on this planet. You're not using it as a processing center. You're using it as a storage unit. So what is thinking, really? Thinking is sitting alone with a question, not rushing toward an answer, embracing the possibility of being wrong, turning an idea over from every angle, asking, is this true? Why is it true? True, according to whom? When does it become false? Thinking is having an honest dialogue with yourself. And that dialogue is often uncomfortable, because questioning your own thoughts is far harder than receiving criticism from someone else. But that discomfort is growth itself. Look at the great turning points in the history of science. Almost all of them come down to this moment. Someone took existing knowledge and asked, but why? While everyone thought the Earth was flat, Pythagoras' students asked, but then why does a ship disappear over the horizon gradually? While everyone thought the sun revolved around the Earth, Copernicus asked, but then why don't the calculations add up? While everyone thought time was fixed, Einstein asked, but what happens as you approach the speed of light? All of these people had read books, but the leap was made not by read books. But the leap was made not by reading, it was made by the question. And you can do this too, every day. While reading the news, you can ask, how does this make me feel, and why? While making a decision, you can ask, do I actually want this, or is this someone else's expectation of me? While solving a problem, you can ask, what would this look like from a completely different angle? That is thinking. And it's something no book can teach you, because a book offers you a framework, but using the framework is up to you. Maybe you're thinking now, okay, but isn't thinking without knowledge just empty? What can you think without knowing anything? And that's a very good question. Yes, to think, you need some raw material. That raw material can be lived experiences, observations, things you've seen, felt, and learned. Books can supply that material too. But here's where a distinction needs to be made. Gathering raw material and processing raw material are very different things. Most of us are only gathering. We wait for enough material to accumulate and expect something to emerge from within us like a miracle. But it doesn't work that way. Raw material doesn't transform on its own. You have to melt it, shape it, interpret it. And that melting, that is thought. Here's something practical I'd suggest. Starting today, spend 15 minutes. Just 15, sitting with one question, without reading anything, without watching anything. Any question. It can be something about your life, a topic you're curious about, a problem you're trying to understand. And for those 15 minutes, just think about it. You don't have to find an answer. Just stay with the question. In the first few days, you'll see how hard this is. Your brain will constantly want to do something, read something, check something, because this isn't a habit for you yet. But after a few weeks, you'll notice something. Ideas will start coming from within. Connections you couldn't see before will begin to appear, and you'll realize your mind can produce far more than what it's been given. Socrates never wrote a book. He never recorded his thoughts. But his way of asking questions, his way of holding a dialogue, his way of thinking, is still being talked about 2,500 years later. Why? Because he wasn't reading, he was thinking. And that thinking was so real, so original, so deep, that it left a mark time could not erase. You can leave a mark too. But a mark is left not by how well you relay someone else's thoughts, but by how much you produce from yourself. Consider this. The world is drowning in information right now. If everything on the internet were printed, what gets written each day would fill hundreds of millions of pages. Access to knowledge has never been easier. And yet people have never been more anxious, more lost, more unable to make sense of their own lives. Why? Because more information doesn't always mean better thinking. In fact, too much information can suppress thought. Your own voice can get lost in the constant flood of input. And losing your own voice may be the greatest loss a person can suffer. That voice, your own thinking voice, is your originality. It's what makes you. Books can nourish that voice, but they cannot replace it. They never can. I'm not telling you to stop reading. I'm telling you this, when you read, think. When you're not reading, think. In your idle moments, think. In your idle moments, think. While you walk, think. Before you sleep, think. Embrace thinking as an act, as a practice, as a way of life. Because books end, ideas don't.